Welcome back into another episode of the Daily Dose. I'm your host, Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. We've had an influx of new subscribers this week. Thank you to each of you who have shown your support. Hit that subscribe button. Please do so if you haven't. It's absolutely free. It costs you nothing, and it does help us out a ton. Thank you so much. We're in the final countdown, folks. BYU football starts in 100 days. And like the president, when they are elected and they're in office, there's a lot of focus on the first 100 days for the president. They have their to-do list. They report on how they accomplish that to-do list. And in politics, of course, no matter how good or bad they did, it's always good. On one side, it's besides the point. Today, we're focusing on the final 100 days before BYU kicks off against Sam Houston State and what's on their checklist, because the coaching staff, Kalani Sitake and his staff, the players, there's a lot of things that need to happen still, and football is getting closer and closer each day. So let's get into it. What are the things that BYU needs to accomplish in their last 100 days before the season gets started? Well, it starts with recruiting. I'm not in the football offices. I don't know who's medically retired. I don't know, if there are players that have been pushed from scholarship players to a walk-on status. I don't know everybody who fits that description. I don't know if there are walk-on players who have received a scholarship. I don't know every single detail. So when I say this, recognize that it's an unofficial count. Clearly, there's not like some sort of scholarship tracker on BYU.com that I could find. But by my unofficial count, I think BYU has up to 5 scholarships still available for the 2023 season. Again, that could be fuzzy math, right? I mean, there could be guys that maybe there's a few more because guys got pushed to walk-on status, or maybe there's a few less because walk-ons were promoted, but I got 5. So let's just call it, 2 to 6 scholarships available. What does BYU do with those? We know they're going after Harrison Taggart, who tells me that he's going to make a decision here in about another week. And we know that they could look at another defensive back. They could look at maybe a defensive lineman. They've looked at those positions in the past, but what are they doing, right? Like, do they have to get those guys? I don't know. We'll see. Clearly, they proved yesterday that they're willing to work behind the scenes. They don't need to make this public. When Ray Palu announced that he would be coming to BYU, former Fresno State defensive end and tight end. So BYU is still working on adding players to the roster. That's one of the big things that they need to do. In the same vein of recruiting, this doesn't help the 2023 football team, but BYU has got to start making inroads on their 2024 class, like in the next 6 weeks. I don't want to express, kind of urgency because signing day is still so far away, but typically BYU has a much fuller class at this point, and especially locally. And local guys start to help build the future, build the class, build relationships, all that good stuff. BYU doesn't have that right now, at least not as big as they probably should. So the Cougars have got to start making some inroads. They're hosting Davis Andrews on a visit here in the coming weeks. They are trying to get Cash Dillon on his official visit in the coming weeks. So there's some guys there that BYU can get that can absolutely check that box and start and become foundational pieces for the future and for the 2024 class. But BYU's got to get them. They've got to sign them. They've got to start making inroads locally. The next thing, in the next 100 days, BYU's got to finalize their strength and conditioning staff. I've been told that it's a lot closer to being done than it looks like publicly to all of us. In fact, it may be done and just not announced yet to the public. But whatever they do, until something's announced in the public in this world, it's not done, right? There still could be changes that happen. BYU's got to get all of their strength and conditioning coaches in place, the head of the program that replaces New Tafisi, and they've got to fill out the rest of that staff. Is it somebody like Skylar Main? Is it Colby Kloss? Whoever it is, they've got to figure out what those roles are. They've got to finalize what those roles are, and they have to publish those roles so that those roles are official and cannot change. That's a very important thing to do in the next 100 days. And finally, at the individual player level, the summer is where players go from being fourth or fifth string in spring ball to making the 2 deep in fall camp. This is where players like Isaiah Glasker or Micah Kafusi or Ace Kafusi, they can show that they are ready to take on bigger roles, even though they're young, or maybe they're new to the linebacker spot. They can show that, hey, there's more linebackers in this room than just the big 3 that everybody talks about. This is where a guy like Jake Retzlaff or Ryder Burton can show that I'm quarterback too. You don't have to worry about anybody if Keaton Slovis goes down because I've got this position locked down. This is where those individual players take what the coaches have given them, feedback, coaching, constructive criticism, all that good stuff. This is where they take all of that from spring ball, and over the next couple of months when the coaches aren't there every day and they're not looking, the players who take that seriously, work on those things, and get better are the players who are going to fill out the rest of the two deep when BYU takes the field against Sam Houston. So at an individual player level, this is where the hard work really gets going. This is where players earn their reps, is in the summer during player run practices. Players also have got to start to prepare to help incoming true freshmen from high school assimilate into the program. And there's some really talented players who are coming, namely Jackson Bowers, Cialia Serra, and LJ Martin. All three of those guys will join the program here in the coming weeks. And all three of those guys have the talent to earn early playing time. So they've got to assimilate within the locker room and within the roster. And then the other existing upperclassmen who have been at BYU for a number of years, they've got to help do so. They've got to help work those guys in while also recognizing that if they don't work hard themselves, those young guys will take their jobs and will take their playing time. Kind of a weird dynamic, but it's something that every team goes through, and it's something that happens in the month of June. So BYU, even though the season's getting close and even though the coaches aren't there with players running practice every single day, there's still a ton of work to do, both at a player and a coach and even at administration level here in the final 100 days before BYU kicks off their season. We'll see how they do, because how they accomplish some of these tasks, how they fill out the rest of the roster, how players work and take feedback from coaches from a few weeks ago, how some of these things play out will ultimately determine whether BYU is successful in their first season as members of the Big 12 Conference. So it's an important time. There's no question about it. Once again, appreciate your support here at the Daily Dose. This is something we're going to continue to do. The feedback's been great. We will continue to produce the Daily Dose each and every day for the foreseeable future because of your support. So thank you so much. And please continue to subscribe to the show. And until next time, give them hell.